Well, welcome everyone. This is Knut Rostad of the Institute for the Fiduciary Standard. This is September 25th, and this is our panel discussion on fixed fees, flat fees. We've got two very experienced planners, advisors who will talk about their experience with this form of compensation. And so to start off, I'll let John Stoy and Scott Salaski introduce themselves, and then we'll have John begin with some opening remarks. John.
All right, thanks, Knut. I appreciate being invited here. I always do like speaking about flat fees. It is what I say to people who drew me back into the industry. And so happy to share my thoughts on that. Definitely don't have quite as much planning experience maybe as Scott does. My firm, Verbatim, opened in February of 2020 and opened as a flat fee planning advisory firm. And that's what's led me to this presentation here today.
Scott?
Hi, my name is Scott Salaski. I am with First Metric. We're a financial advisory and investment management firm. I've been a financial advisor for 25 years now, geez. First Metric I've been with for about 7 to 8 years. Prior to that, I was a partner with another firm. And my whole career really has been revolved around basically charging fair fees to clients for services provided, whether that being initially as a partner in another firm. We were charging a very low AUM fee at 0.25% back in 1999. That was unheard of. There was no robo-advisors. Nothing was going on at that time of people managing money and providing advice for that. And then when I sold my interest in that firm and took some time off, I relaunched another advisory firm, First Metric, and then looked at all the different models and thought that fixed flat fees was really the way to go and what the future was as far as transparency for clients and what people were going to be demanding going forward. So I think we'll get into more of that as we go through here.
Thank you, Scott. Before I hand it back over to John, let me just do a little bit of an introduction in terms of the where the Institute for the Fiduciary Standard is on the issue of flat fee, fixed fee, hourly. And I view it in the context of those methods in contrast to the traditional AUM compensation model. And the Institute per se does not take a position on compensation method as we are discussing today. But I find it a very interesting conversation because it seems to attract a lot of attention, and it seems to be a key focal point for a certain segment of advisors. And I should also say at the outset that last year, it was just last year, I did meet with regulators in 2 states regarding their concerns about flat fee and fixed fee, and I met with 2 or 3 other advisors, planners there, and in one of those meetings, Scott was included as well. And so that's a little bit of a background in terms of where we're coming from. So with that brief overview, I'll hand the mic back to John.
All right. Yeah, thanks again, Knut. So I think the thing that I mentioned when I did my brief introduction earlier is how I got back into the business because of the possibility of offering flat fee advisory. And the reason why I say that is prior to 2020, I was in different areas of finance. I started out in the 90s as a bond trader, and then a investment banker, banking, specialty finance companies, creating securities, creating and structuring asset-backed securities of all nature. And then I managed bond portfolios institutionally for a large insurance company as well as a large bank here in Atlanta. And after the financial crisis, I left the industry for a little while and realized that I wanted, after several years, I wanted to get back into finance. And for years, people had said to me, well, John, geez, you know what you're doing. You've managed all this money. You should just become a financial advisor. And I would be, I don't know, why would I do that? And they said, well, it's my friends from the industry, you've got to remember, said it's the greatest thing in the world. All you do is you collect people's money and then you charge them a percent every year. And as their portfolios grow, your income just goes up. Um, and they thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And I thought about that and I explained it to my wife and she said, well, that sounds pretty good. Why don't you look into it? And so I did. But I kept coming up against a wall internally, which is that I knew from managing portfolios that had very specific corporate mandates and investor mandates that for the most part, unless you are specifically trying to be a hedge fund manager to and to outperform whatever market you're trying to outperform, I could not pick an investment that was going to do better than the market. So if I knew that going in, or if that was my belief, then what would be my argument to a person to say, to a potential client to say, well, you should pay me a percentage of your savings and hard-earned money that you've earned over the course of your lifetime, simply for me to choose investments for you. Didn't make any sense to me. I was very, very lucky that another friend of mine from high school, actually, so literally known the guy since 1984. Jack Zarinsky runs a company called SafeBridge, and he said, John, you actually could be an advisor if you want. And did you even know that I was a flat fee advisor? And of course I didn't. I didn't. And he explained that it's actually possible to run a business, to give people good financial advice, and to manage their investments not by charging them on a percentage basis of the assets under management, but by charging them for the work that you do for them, very specifically. So you could tell them, this is what I do for you. I do financial planning. We do cash flow management. We do, and you can make a laundry list, whatever your firm wishes to do for the client. Choose a price that you, as the advisor and the business owner, feel is a fair price for your time and effort, and tell the client straight up and very transparently, this is the price you are going to pay for my services. And once that sort of light bulb clicked for me, that is what allowed me, again, as I say, to get back into the industry that I had been in for 20 years prior. And so it was all flat fee for me, which is why I think that Knut invited me to come on here and chat about the subject, because it's an emotional topic for me, because again, it's now my livelihood. It's now what I plan on doing for the next 20 years. And it's only because I realized that there are options out there. Now, of course, once I discovered this, I found there are people that have been doing it for much longer than I had, such as those people on the call today. But that's where I got to, and I don't know, Scott, how your sort of light switch flipped, maybe.
Yeah, so that's a good point to talk about, because I think, you brought up, John, kind of your background and then kind of what prompted you to go to the flat fee model versus an AUM model when you launched out. And it was a little bit, pretty much the same way, a little bit different though. I mean, because I started with AUM when a partner and I had a different firm. But again, we thought it was a fair fee, even though AUM, nobody was doing flat fees back then. It was kind of really even unheard of from a flat fee aspect. Certainly wasn't really advice only. Everybody was doing mostly, some form of investment management with either free financial planning or free advice, or, we're calling it free, even though we know it's not free. It's part of the fee that you're paying. So kind of my epiphany was when I got into the business to begin with, not me personally, but a family member really got taken to the cleaners with a commission only advisor through a broker dealer. And it was one of these situations where these advisors, and I'll use that term loosely in this sense, would kind of scour the senior centers of different cities and so on, and do presentations and then put them into commission products like American funds. I guess that's not the end of the world if you got to have a commission product, but still there's other products that they were putting people in, annuities they didn't need, and a number of other things. And one of my family members lost significant amounts of money, not only by the products that they were in, but also the fact that once the advisor sold these products to the client, they were virtually unavailable for the most part for ongoing conversation and provide proper advice in the sense. So truly they were a salesperson, even though there's other commission people these days that, they do some form of advice and planning. But back in the day, that was not really the model. So I looked at that and I said, this is unbelievable. And it really piqued my interest as to what is really going on in financial advice. And it was all new to me. And I was still in college back at that time. And I said, I'm going to go into finance. And then, one thing led to another. And since that was sort of ingrained in my mind that I did not want to be selling products because of the experiences with a family member, what options were available. So I looked at, what's available out there. There was not really anything at the broker dealers that fit that model. And then, RIAs, even at that time, 25 years ago, they were not like they are today, where it's like a household term, RIA, for the most part, people within this industry. There were RIAs, but, going to get a job or doing something at one of those firms, they were very small in nature. They're not these multi-billion-dollar RIAs today where you could go and kind of get a intern position and learn the industry in that. So I went to school, I launched my own company, and then just sort of by luck, there was another person locally here in Michigan, and we met each other and spent a lot of time together over a course of a year, and decided that let's kind of merge our ideas together and form a company and move forward. And we did that for about 15 years and built a pretty good clientele that we provided financial advice and investment management for, charging people, fortunately or unfortunately, whatever you want to say, it was an AUM model because that's what the industry was back then. But we said, what can be different? And the industry is charging clients 1% for these services, assuming that, services were comparable. And we said, well, let's do it for 1/4%. Well, our actually fee was actually lower than 1/4% when you look at the weighted average fee that we were actually charging clients across the board. But, based on our top tier, it was 1/4%. And guess what? We were all making a good living. We had about, I want to say at the time, maybe 18 to 20 people working directly for our company as advisors and support staff that were actually employees at the company. So you can make a good living charging people a fair fee. And I think online, people, I'm pretty active on social media, and people sometimes kind of view my position as very hard. It has to be flat fee and it has to be a certain amount and this and that. I'm sort of fee agnostic as far as the model goes. I have a more issue with, what is the client being charged under those models and what services are being provided, because I think, the AUM model that we had in the past, again, that had flaws just like any other model, that we were charging people a fair fee for the services we were providing when everybody else was charging people 4 times that. So when I left and started First Metric about 7 or 8 years ago, I said, what fee do I want to charge? And I actually started charging an AUM fee when I launched 7 or 8 years ago, First Metric, but I charged them 1/4 point. And then some were even less because there were larger clients that were involved in this. I got to the point where, as I was bringing clients on, I said, the fee has to have some sort of cap, even at 1/4%. We never had a cap in the past, but in the new firm, I wanted to put a top level cap on it, just like sort of a bottom, floor, if you will. And so when you start looking at these ranges, what's the cap and what's the floor, then you're still now in this range. Are you really charging people an AUM fee? And what's the point of doing that? So at that point, I kind of went back and revisited after maybe a year and a half of doing a quarter of a point and a tiered down from there AUM fee schedule, and said, okay, how much time am I spending with clients? And I knew from past life, charging AUM, that, how much time you're spending with clients on average, providing advice, doing planning, investment management, all the services that are being provided. Of course, everybody's going to be different. Some's going to have more time you spend with, some less time, but there's generally an average, just sort of like an average fee. So I looked at this and I said, what is the average fee that kind of charging now with this top ceiling and this floor under this AUM model? And it was one level, and I said, okay, let me charge a fixed flat fee instead of AUM. So I kept all the clients that I had on the AUM model, started charging a fixed flat fee, and then went through several iterations of that till I got to the fee that was the right fee. And so I charge clients a fixed flat fee of $495 a month, which is just under $6,000 a year. I provide advice to clients as needed and full service investment management. And then I have an issue with kind of the term financial planning as a catch-all in this industry. So, but look, for today's discussion, I'll go with the term financial planning because the industry uses it. Financial planning services, whatever falls under this bucket that I can, define if we want to get into the weeds of that. But, basically I'm providing comparable services that most advisors are doing, but I'm doing it for a fixed flat fee instead of an AUM. So again, back to my issue. My issue is how much are clients paying in hard dollars and what are they getting for that? Not so much are they getting AUM or hourly or fixed flat fees or a combination of all of these things, or even commission. Commission's a little different, though. I have, some other issues that are,
We may have lost Scott for a little bit there.
Yeah, it looks like that's the case.
some of the connections are. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. You
Oh,
were
okay.
blank there for a few
Yeah,
seconds.
it's weird. I froze up there for a minute. But anyway, some of the issues that people have with fixed flat fees, and John, maybe you can talk about this as well, is that, oh, well, if you're charging clients a fixed flat fee, then you're not doing as much work. You can sit back and let the fees come in every month, and you're not really being held accountable. Okay, well, what's the AUM model if that's true? So it's the same thing. I mean, whether you're charging AUM or fixed flat fee, that it's the same premise there, that how does the client know what services you're providing if you're going to sit back and just collect an AUM fee every month? I think from that aspect of what are you doing, the hourly model works, but there's a lot of other issues that are attached from the hourly model, because I've kind of seen this, and we worked with at my prior firm, that I was partnering. We worked with the Garrett Planning Network before the XY network was in existence, and so I have a lot of experience working with hourly planners as well, and kind of what their challenges were. So there's no perfect model out there. The question just becomes, what's the right dollar amount that people are paying? And you always get this argument of, well, the client knows what the value is that they're getting. Well, not really. I mean, if they go to advisor A down the street that's charging 1% of AUM, okay, that's the fee and this is what you're getting. They go to advisor number 2, they're charging 1% AUM, and the fees look, the services look relatively the same. You go to advisor number 3, it's 1% AUM. So the client doesn't know that, okay, this is the norm now. I must be paying 1%, and this is the general services I'm getting from people. If they knew that other options existed, then I would say yes, then it's a free market and people can go and see what value they're getting for the fees they're paying. But when you're not in tune with what the going fee should be in the services provided, then you look at 3 or 4 advisors and they're all charging and doing the same thing perceptually, then it's tough for somebody to say, I'm getting value, so I don't mind paying higher fees or a different fee model.
Wow.
Yeah.
Scott, you put a lot there. Let me, before you jump in, John, interested in the way that you view this in terms of what is the client paying and what is the client getting, more so than is it a fixed fee or is it an AUM fee? But as you also acknowledge, the notion of comprehensive financial planning, you didn't use that word, but I don't know whether that's what you meant, but but what it comes down to is what is involved, what is entailed in the financial planning. And better than I do that it can it can vary tremendously in terms of the depth and the breadth and of the service. So I wonder about that, and then in terms of what the clients know up front in terms of what you is entailed in your financial planning. Is it something that in any way that they can look at what the guy down the street is doing and sort of make any sort of comparisons, or is it by its very nature just too much to expect from a individual investor to be able to do that? So one question has to do with the financial planning service, and the other one, in your case, in terms of the investment management side, do you lean towards active management or towards passive management, or a mix of the both? And do you think that should come into play in terms of how one values the investment management piece of it? So just your thoughts on those two questions, and then we'll let John get in here.
Yeah, so we'll take the investment management one first. I mean, my thought on that is, well, my philosophy on that is I believe in passive, and
Okay.
there's the reality is I don't want to get into the weeds of all of this because we're
No. I
keep
just
the top level, but I know
high
what you're
level.
saying. Yeah, I know what you're saying,
Level.
Knut. So it's at a high level, we'll call it passive. Vanguard, dimensional funds, ETFs. I mean, combination depending on the client's needs and what they're looking for. But again, these are index-based investment products that you're not out there, calling clients up saying, I think interest rates are going to do this, or I think, this fund is going to do X, Y, or Z. So let's make these changes and do all kinds of, I'll call guru function, even though, that's not needed. So then the question becomes, should clients pay more for active management? I guess it depends on what that advisor's version of active management is and what the client is getting from that. If the advisor's version is I go to Morningstar and pick out 10, 5-star funds, and they've got some philosophy, methodology for doing that, and then they throw them in some funds, and then they're not really looked at until the next meeting. It's like, oh yeah, that's not doing too good. Let's put it in this other fund. Then no, they shouldn't be paying significantly more. They should actually probably be paying less because the advisor's probably going to lose their money just because they're not really doing active management. So if they're picking stocks and doing other things, then the question becomes, track records, and is it worth it? And, a whole different discussion that's not really part of this panel today. So that's my view on it. What was the other part of your question, Knut?
Well, that had to do with financial planning per se has no definition as a generic issue. And so when someone is looking at the services you provide for financial planning, is there enough detail that if this is a sophisticated individual investor, they could actually look at your breadth and depth of services and compare it to any place else? Or is it by its very definition, it's almost impossible to do because they won't really learn it and appreciate it until you go through it with them, sort of thing?
It's not only impossible, in my opinion, for a consumer to figure that out, it's also impossible for advisors to even agree on the topic of what financial planning is. So if the revert idea is, most advisors, when you bring this topic up, they seem to take issue with it because it's like, oh, well, this is the term, this is what we use. But then they revert back to the CFP board. This is the CFP board's version of financial planning. Great. Is that what you're doing? And then there's all kinds of deviations from that. So, when advisors can't agree on it, then it makes it almost impossible for consumers to sort of compare services from one advisor to another.
All right. Thank you. John, you've been waiting patiently. Jump in.
No, it's okay. And I can just, I'll just pick right up on that because I happen to fully agree with Scott on this in terms of the difficulty in having a definition of financial planning and what is it, because of, even I know for my clients, the planning that they need is different from person to person. So the idea of, and it makes it difficult, obviously, for the consumer to evaluate advisors. Yes, because they can look at websites. Some advisors will put sample financial plans on their websites, and a lot of them will look very similar, right? Because they've taken that lead from either the CFP or a group, or I was initially part of another group called the Alliance for Comprehensive Planning. They say ACP and it was a fantastic group, and they have their template for a financial plan. But in the end, you know, we all run our businesses differently. I run my business. I think of it as advisory first, and I really want to be that person's trusted advisor. You can't advise someone without having a sense of a plan, of putting together a plan for some future that they're hoping to accomplish, or some goal they're hoping to accomplish. But it's advisory, and so I'm very clear with them that I'm not handing them a paperweight of 20 or 30 page financial plan for them to put in the closet, right? But they have to evaluate the type of service they're going to get from any particular advisor. And then they have to think, okay, what am I spending for it? And this flips back to what Scott's saying. Well, if they're all charging 1%, or even if it's on a scale, you'll see them over 1%, but then they ratchet it down. They have breakpoints, and they could get to 0.75%, whatever. Point is that you still don't know the dollars that you're going to be paying every year necessarily, unless you get your calculator out or you dig into your statements. And is that dollar what you're paying for? I don't believe that it's super clear. And I think also that putting the dollar right in front of a person lets them internalize it. I know I'm paying this money for a service. And I think that discourages some advisors. It frightens them, because then they're afraid that their client is going to say, "Well, geez, I'm overpaying. What am I getting for this?" Right? That's a concern that advisors have. But if we are putting our business forward, and if we are confident that in the services that we render to our clients, then the market will decide whether we are charging too much or not charging enough, essentially based upon how many people are phoning us up for work. And I think it's an important point that I want to throw in there that I make a lot when I talk about this, either in person or online, which is that flat or fixed fees don't necessarily have to be the cheapest fees, right? Because you're paying for a specific service. My service for my clients is quite in depth. They have, essentially my cell phone number, and they call me a lot. And I tell them that if you're not calling me, if I'm just calling you and pulling at your teeth to try to get a meeting twice a year, then you probably shouldn't be paying me, because just as Scott, I happen to agree with Scott on creating simple portfolios, indexing. I'm not digging around in their portfolios. I'm not constantly researching this, that, and the other thing. Obviously we all monitor the markets, and we all keep track of geopolitical and blah blah blah. That's fun. It's fun to do. It's smart to do. But we're not making portfolio decisions based upon exogenous events. We're making the portfolio decisions, at least I am, and I believe this is the case here, based on the client's life events, right? And so I'm not charging for. I do investment management, and I feel like it's very important to have custody at one of my custodians of the client's money, because I find that we actually accomplish tasks quicker when that's the case, and that's often important. But it's not. But people will accuse flat fee advisors. Oh, you're just going to try to undercut us. It's going to be cheap, and no, it might be. And my fee, an annual fee, is higher than Scott's, but we don't operate our business exactly the same either. So it gives the client has to know what they're going to pay, as long as they know, and then they can interview the advisor or planner and decide if there's a fit, and if what they are offering are the services that they need, then that gives, again, the consumer the sort of a better, a better place to start from.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Scott, anything you want to add to what John just said, or
No, I think I agree with mostly everything that John had mentioned here. I think, at the end of the day, one of the things too with kind of an AUM to a fixed flat fee too is that even though the fixed flat fees might be different from advisor to advisor, obviously, like John just mentioned, his fee may be higher than mine or vice versa. But the reality is it's based on the services that are being provided and that the advisor is getting compensated fairly for the services that they're delivering. And the client knows what the advisor is delivering. What sometimes under the AUM, not sometimes, really all the time, under the AUM model. And, I've experienced this firsthand with, kind of the dot-com crash really was when we were starting our prior business right around that time. And then, the Great Recession that took place. Is those are periods of time where the advisor generally is working the hardest too, not just from an advice standpoint, but also, hand holding and behavioral, issues, emotional issues, all kinds of things with clients. So you're constantly on the phone more so than you ever would be under normal circumstances. And during
Right.
that time, advisors are getting paid less under an AUM model because the markets have lost value, and that could be for a short period or a long period of time. And then under, basically more recent times now since COVID, the markets have done nothing but go up. So what ends up happening with clients, and John, you may agree or disagree with this, and certainly jump in, but my experience has been that under any model, the longer you are working with a client, the less work sometimes the clients require because you know them, you know their circumstances, and you're not doing different work. You just don't need to meet as frequently, or if you do, it's because certain things come up that were unplanned for, or that they just need advice on. So, from that aspect, when you're working, you know what to price a client under a fixed fee model because you're providing kind of the same level of service. So my model, I priced in the idea that, yeah, we're going to have downturns in the market and I'm going to spend more time with certain clients than others because certain clients than others need more time spent with them, whether they're new to indexing or they're new to investing or they're new to the firm or any reason why you might spend more time with one client or another. But it's fit into the model of doing that. So, under the AUM model, you're making less money when the market's down, you're making more money when it's up. And it's like the question becomes in my mind of, since basically, COVID, and now we're here, the markets have had a tremendous run. Advisors are getting raises every single year, even though they're not even charging and changing their AUM fees. So every year, you start with, you'll say you're a brand new client at the start of COVID with the advisor. Every year now, this advisor has got a raise because the markets have gone up, even though their fee is the same as far as a percentage of AUM. And then the client now has been with you longer and longer and longer. So the tendency is you don't need to be doing the same level of work that you've been doing. So yes, clients become more profitable to an advisor over time, but they become even more profitable to an advisor under the AUM model over time.
To your point there, I was thinking about this listening to John. To your point that after a certain starting period, and I don't know how you think of it, whether it's 1 year or 2 year, the workload in a sense decreases because you've done the startup stuff, however long that is.
Well, and also you're keeping track of it. You're keeping up to date too. It's not like a new engagement every time.
Right. So I guess my question is, do you guys for when you're not working, I don't even know whether you do project work, maybe you don't, but for a normal client, do you have an annual review of the scope and the pricing, or does that not necessarily happen like that? Have an annual review?
I personally don't have an annual review from pricing and scope of work because it's very clear in the onset what they're paying. They're paying the same fee every month. There's no question about that. So,
okay, John?
and I don't do project work.
Okay. John? Are you there?
John is frozen.
It looks like we've been frozen. Okay, I'd like to bring in someone that's on here who may have a little bit of a different view, and because I know that he'll have some interesting comments to make. Clark, are you there? Clark Blackman? Well, maybe he walked away. Clark is one of our members, and he's a longtime AUM advisor, and has spoken on that. Clark, you are there.
I am here, Canute. Yeah,
I didn't want to put you on the spot, but if you had a couple of comments,
yes.
at a high level, that would
I love how
that would add to this
qualify that.
conversation.
Keep it at a high level and don't get into the weeds. I get that a lot, guys. I get that a lot. This is a big discussion, I think, and I am really just going to touch on a small number of things because I could binge here for an hour about why I charge AUM. I've been in this business really since 1980. Started on the sales side, insurance license, broker license, Series 6, all that. And went back into the CPA world. I started as a CPA at Anderson, and then I got back into the fee only in 85 with a local firm in Chicago in their financial planning department. And I headed that up for a number of years. And then I went to Price Waterhouse and then Deloitte. And in about 2019, I'm sorry, 2099. So
Okay, Clark,
I've been the whole
to...
gamut of fees. We started charging fees on a flat fee basis. After I got out of the commission side of that in 85, we charged a flat fee. It was based on hours spent because as a CPA, that was required. You could not charge a flat fee that wasn't based on hours spent. And it wasn't until 1990 that the AICPA allowed CPAs to bill other than hourly. So this idea, and we were doing financial planning. So the idea that doing financial planning for a flat fee is new, it's not. It's what's old is new, what's new is old. It wasn't until the 90s that planners started to get registered and could charge fees AUM. And so I struggled for years trying to make a living doing financial planning for an hourly, for either an hourly or a fixed fee. To me, here's what I like about AUM. It is very transparent if you explain it properly to your clients, and our clients get a quarterly letter that tells them exactly what their fee was and how it was calculated, and they can recalculate it based on custody statements and their agreement. So not only is it clear to them, and let's face it, guys, it's a fixed fee. It's just calculated every quarter. And now the client knows exactly how their fixed fee is calculated. And they know that somebody with less assets than they have is paying less. And someone with more assets is paying more. And part of, to me, and I'm coming at this from the perspective of a registered investment advisor who leads with investment consulting services. Yes, we do some estate planning. We do some retirement planning. We don't do comprehensive financial planning. All right. And we do a lot of ongoing due diligence that isn't applicable to an individual client. This is value billing, and value billing exists in every profession, whether it's a doctor, a lawyer, or a CPA. CPAs can now do value billing, again, since 1990. And the beauty of it is that every client knows they're paying based on how much they have in assets, and that is the value that they're getting. So we have a $5 million minimum. At that level, it's about 60 basis points is what we charge. And again, clients know exactly what they're paying. and what they're getting. And I just think that it's a model that works well given how much work you have to do that isn't specific to a client.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have John back? I don't think so. I don't think
So
so.
let me kind of piggyback off of what Clark was
Yeah.
saying for a couple
Yep,
minutes.
yep.
And thanks, Clark. I appreciate your insight on that. My philosophy on that is that, and I agree that, some clients, are going to be paying less and some clients are going to be paying more under an AUM model, depending on what the fee schedule is. But the reality is, and you mentioned this, is that, clients know that some clients are going to be paying less and some clients are going to be paying more. Unless you're explicitly telling clients that, or any advisor for that matter, I don't think we can just assume that clients, that's going through their thought process, even though they can figure it out based on, okay, this fee model, if I had less, I'd be paying less. If I had more, I'd be paying more. They're not looking at it from that sense. So, is that fair then? Is it their responsibility to sort of figure that out, that you might, again, you may not personally, but other advisors may look at that and say, well, this client has 10 or $15 million that we're overseeing. So I want to spend more time with this client. It's more valuable to the firm. It's value-based pricing, as you were saying, than a client that has, less money. So at the end of the day, I kind of look at it in my mind is that if I'm providing the same service to clients across the board, it doesn't really matter how much is in their bank account because I'm not going to provide a different service to them. With time-wise, you might spend more time actually with clients that have less money than the clients that have more money, depending on the situation. I've got some clients that have $10 million in one single account, and then I've got other clients that got $2 or $3 million in 10 different accounts. Certainly the clients with $2 or $3 million take a lot more time because I got to open a lot more accounts and I got to maintain accounts and do all kinds of administrative things with more accounts that are involved. So there's no really great resolution to any of that,
Well,
even under the fixed fee model, because again, I'm charging that client the same fixed fee as the next client, but I built that into my pricing model. I'm not charging them less than the next client. So that's just kind of my view on the AUM. It's not that it's unfair or anything. It's just that at the end of the day, we can't just assume that clients should know or be thinking about things that we think about as advisors in the industry.
okay. And Scott, here's something to think about. It's a mindset. You have a mindset that the value that you provide to a client is a function of how much time you spend on that client. I would argue that that is absolutely untrue. The client really doesn't care how much time you're spending unless you're
That's
billing
true.
by the hour, and then they're upset because you're spending too much time. It's about value. Scott, the value you're bringing to the table in some cases is immeasurable to that client. You're way undercharging that client based on the value you're bringing to the table. Now,
I agree with you.
You can't know what that value is ahead of time, but what you do know is that the work that you do, the advice that you're giving has more value monetarily to someone with $10 million than it does to someone with $500,000. And you should be charging based on your value. Guy's got 10 million, he can afford it, he should pay the freight. Even if you're doing less work for him on an hourly basis than that $500,000 client. That $10 million client is loving every bit of what you're doing for him, and he thinks he's paying a fair price. And if he didn't, he'd be going somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, I think we'll agree to disagree, Clark, as far as that goes, because I've seen, posts online that I kind of get into discussions with people about that. I saved a client, $50,000 in taxes, so that more than, covers my fee, and they should be very happy and, have no problem paying $50, $60, $70, $100,000 a year in fees. And I get, go back to the same example as, should doctors do the same thing? Your life is invaluable. Where do you draw the line with, surgeries and things? at the end of the day, there's a certain amount that people are willing and can afford to pay. And I agree with you, somebody with 10 million certainly can pay more than somebody with less money than that. But if you're providing the same services, it's not just a function of hours that I'm looking at. Yes, they're getting a good deal, but they are getting experience and they're getting, the advice. So they are getting, I hate the word value, but they're getting value for not just what they're paying, but for what they think that they're getting for services. And at the end of the day, again, I don't know what you do or what any other advisor does without looking at their firm or you telling me, but the reality is if we're all providing roughly the same thing for clients, at the end of the day, it comes down to fees. If we're providing different things for clients, then I think, yeah, fees are a fair conversation and advisors should fairly be paid for the services that we're providing. But, here's an example. I have a client, without getting into too much specifics, account size and that, but it's a very wealthy client, and they were with a low-cost firm, a huge firm, and they were looking to transition. So they go on out and they start interviewing other advisors, and this client had relatively all passive investment products on the investment side and required somewhat very little advice on the advice side because of their unique circumstances involved. And they went to other advisors that wanted to basically sell most of the index funds they had to put them all into other types of index funds, believe it or not, and charge them 60, I think it was $65,000 a year in advisor fees to do that. So yeah, these are outliers, but this stuff happens all day long. And, again, money, the size of a portfolio doesn't really have anything to do with that. It's the fact is the firm and the advisor providing the right services and is a good service match for the client. So if you're doing 50 or 60 or $100,000 worth of services, great. The client should be paying that because that is what you're providing to them. But if it's based on some number, I've saved them X number of dollars in taxes, or I saved them an X number of dollars in other ways in their portfolio because of fees of investment products, or getting them out of, higher cost insurance products or whatnot. Yeah, there's value there, but I don't, in my opinion, maybe this is where we differ. I don't think a client should be compensating an advisor relatively dollar for dollar of how much they're saving them from a values-based pricing model.
Thank you, Scott. I'm gonna interject here. Mia, John is waiting in the waiting room to get back in. I don't know whether you can see him there, but he sent me an email. So if you could let him in, he'd like to continue this conversation. I'd like to ask a question for both you, Scott and Clark. You've just visited with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Each of you has given them a proposal with a list of services and a price, and they come back to both of you and say, I've been visiting with this other guy who, charges a little bit differently. Tell me, first they ask Scott, tell me, Scott, why a fixed fee, in your opinion, is better than an AUM. And then I'm going to ask Clark the exact same thing. Clark, tell us why you think it's better for us to be charged an AUM fee as opposed to a fixed fee, and keep it at a high level and just mention two or 3 points to answer that question of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Scott?
Yeah, it's a little hard to do that, but we don't know what the other model is that we're comparing to. But the reality is, at a high level, if a client or a prospective client is coming on board saying we talked to somebody else and they charge differently, whatever it is.
I meant to make the direct comparison: fixed fee versus AUM. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So
yes.
That the other guy, whoever that person is charging by AUM.
Okay, so in that case, I mean, it comes down to the services and fees. So I would just simply say, are the fees the same? No, they're different. Is the services the same? They look relatively the same. Okay, well, where's the differences? And then if the services are relatively the same after talking with this person, then you can get into this becomes a fee discussion. Then, what's a fair fee? What do you want to pay? What do you think you should be paying? What have you done in the past? Have you had advisors in the past? Have you, paid advisors differently than you're looking to pay now? So, getting experience to kind of advise them of how you're different. It's just not like, here's 3 bullet points of, here's the talking points, if you will, of why flat fees are better, because frankly, sometimes flat fees might not be better for a client. So if a client has a smaller amount of money and doesn't require a lot of services, maybe they need to go see, you know, an advisor that's not going to manage their money. So it doesn't matter whether you're paying a flat
Yeah,
fee
yeah,
or you're
okay,
paying an
okay.
AUM. So
All right. All right. Well, okay. So you might tell them that, in fact, the other guy may have a better deal for you depending on the situation.
yeah, I mean, I've referred people that come to me and I say, here's 3 other advisors, and I would actually start with this one because it's a better match. And I tell people right out of the gate that we don't even get into fee discussions or anything. They might have found me based on that, or services or something, or
Mhm.
however they found me. But it turns right away to what are they looking for, and are we even in the right, you know, realm of providing you any level of service that you're looking for here, or you need to go talk to this other person. I mean, I started even working with a couple people, and within a couple meetings said, this isn't the right fit because of what they want and need from an advisor. They don't have a lot of money, or it's all tied up in their 401k, or I wouldn't be providing a lot of work on the investment management front. So
Yeah,
now I'm just
yeah.
doing the advice, and is my fee fair for now the level of advice that they only need?
Yeah. Okay, Clark, that was more than just two or three bullet points, Scott. But
Yeah.
so Clark,
Sorry.
That's all right.
so
Hey,
no,
so-
Clark. So now the Smiths are coming back to you and say, you know, ask the same question: why is the AUM fee model better than the fixed fee model?
Okay, so let me start with an anecdote. About 20 years ago, a client I've had for 35 years, and he's our largest client, and he's worth about $65 million that we helped him with. I went to him and asked him if he would like to go on a fixed fee. He said, absolutely not. I want to know that when I'm making more money, you're making more money. And when I'm making less money, you're making less money. That was the end of that discussion.
Okay.
All
All right.
There are people that do see that as putting you on the same side of the table. Now, we don't, you know, we're not compensated by, you know, like hedge funds or anything like that. And in fact, and at this point, given the size of his portfolio, he's paying us about 18 basis points a year. And obviously that goes up as the assets go down. But he pays us a lot of money, and he sees value. And every quarter, he and every client get a letter that details exactly what they've paid us. So I like the transparency of it. I like the fact that they know how their fee was calculated. They do know that different people with different amounts of assets pay us different amounts of money. And
Yeah.
Scott, you know, my clients are all pretty sharp people. I think they know that they're paying more if somebody has fewer assets with us. But they're okay with that. Why are they okay with that? Because they see the value. They're getting the value. I know that most of our clients are in a level of assets. I'm sure they're getting hit on fairly frequently by other advisors. If we weren't adding value that they thought was fair for what they're paying,
Yeah.
they would be gone. But we don't lose clients.
All right. Thank you. John is still coming in. He's not in yet, but is there anybody else with a question for either Scott or our guest speaker, Clark, now? Anybody else who's on the call? I guess not. I guess not. Okay, Scott, is there anything else that you'd like to sort of conclude with from
Playing
this
from
discussion?
John's Mac MIDI.
All right,
Oh.
John is coming back.
Amazing. Hey, sorry, I'm sure I missed a lot.
I'll
Well,
let John speak because he hasn't had time. So
Okay, John, so you can ask this question based on the conversation over the last 10 minutes. We have Scott and one of our guests here, Clark Blackman, who's a member of ours, who is AUM. Speak on the Clark is speaking on the virtues of AUM, and so you should have seen the fight they got into, John. It was just unbelievable. I mean, No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. They were both extremely polite, extremely well behaved. So no. So I what I don't know where we were when you were taken by the hurricane, John.
Yeah,
what
I don't know either. I think you know, we were just saying that I think the last thing I said was that that in theory, although I believe it to be true, giving consumers a number that they can attach to a service rendered is easier for them to interpret.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, see, and Clark explained to us that how transparent he is and how knowledgeable his clients are in terms of understanding what they're paying and what they're getting. So uh, so that was part of what we went through. But okay, is there any other part of this topic that that any of you would like to add on to, and as sort of a final comment, or have we covered all the bases, and all the wisdom has been spread out, and everybody will be wiser for having listened to this panel discussion.
Well, I don't know if anybody will be wiser, but it's hopefully they'll be a little bit more educated.
Okay. All right. John, anything else?
No, well, you just one thing, not having heard the Clark's defense, what I can say from obviously anecdotal evidence is worth, you know, probably as much as the light coming out of the screens that we're watching this on, but but definitely I have had clients and also friends who work with AUM based advisors who receive regular statements from their advisor specifically listing the amount that they're paying each quarter, and that, you know, is transparent, and I applaud that. I think the other thing is that we get into these discussions, especially amongst advisors, based on you know, the pricing schemes and models that they use, and RIAs, and Scott used the term earlier, you know, so nobody knew what an RIA was 20 years ago, but now more and more people know that an RIA is different than a broker dealer. RIA is usually independent, registered investment advisors, and things like that. For the most part, the advisors who work for RIAs really care about their clients, and they get offended by this idea that we think that flat fees is great, and there's something wrong with AUM fees. And really the problem, or the main offender is amongst the broker dealers who are charging that percentage to folks, where they really aren't delivering, say, the service that Clark might be, that Scott might be, that I might be, etc. And yet they're just sort of clipping the coupon. And that's something that I always remembered from when I was managing money, and especially when we opened up our own asset manager. We were managing, again, large bond portfolios, and so our management fee was only 6 basis points, but we were managing transactions that we would do multiple transactions a year, and the transactions were between 800 and 1.2 billion. And so 6 basis points becomes a material amount of money that you're collecting. And you did the same work for all of the transactions, right? And so every transaction you added upon that pile was just more coupon that you were clipping. And we all, you know, high-fived each other, and that's what Wall Street loves to do to their clients. Whereas advisors who care about their clients, and are just looking to provide the best service that they can render, I don't think we mean to, you know, blame them for an industry standard, or what has been the industry standard in terms of a pricing model.
Yeah. I'm just going to say as a sort of final thought, and because all three of you have mentioned this, not just once, but on a number of occasions, and that is the we and you tend to use the word transparency, but I want to go further and talk about clarity, because that's the difference between disclosing information, and then also I think the difference and that information that is disclosed in such a way that can be understood by a client. And one of the examples I love to use is, Ameriprise is great at transparency. They take 16 pages to explain how we get paid, and of course nobody has a clue what that means for them as a client, much or customer, much less what it means for their rep. What is the rep supposed to understand from that? But actually, Ameriprise goes one step further and says that they keep some of their revenue streams from their own reps. So the rep literally does not know what the revenue situation is behind the curtain. And I think that's a piece of it that really gets to everybody. And when I look at the websites of the fixed fee, flat fee firms, there appears to be greater transparency and clarity up front in terms of, as Scott said, this is what we do, and this is what you're going to pay. And it's in concept, it's simple, but it's sometimes not as well done as it should be. But so anyway, that is the piece I focus on, and I started out saying, and Clark, I don't know whether you were on here or not, that I look at AUM advisors in three buckets, and you are in the third bucket, Clark, that is closest, I think, to a flat fee, fixed fee in terms of its transparency, clarity, and fairness. But there are two other buckets there that are not nearly there. And to me, the first bucket is they're gonna throw everything into some sort of throw all the assets into an ETF or an index fund and charge you 100 basis points and do literally almost nothing else. That's one scenario, and I don't find that defensible. And but the other piece of that is, and again, all you guys focused on this as well. They will throw all the assets into an index fund or an ETF, and they'll say we'll do some financial planning without being specific and clear about what that entails. And so that gets back to, it's partly an industry problem, as I think both Scott and John pointed out. The advisors can't agree on what financial planning is, so that makes it a problem. But it also becomes a problem with I think, as you guys know, a problem for the state regulators. My experience visiting with two different states was that was sort of a key issue of theirs in terms of being able to understand what is it that your clients are getting for the fees that are paid. And I thought one of the ironies is that, again, as a group, the fixed fee folks were about as transparent, as clear as any group out there. So anyway, so on that one, I will thank John and Scott for joining, and for Clark for being a guest lecturer, sort of by joining as well and providing a different perspective. And as I say, we will get this up on the website later on today. And thank you very much. And with that, we can sign off and stop the recording. So have a good rest of the day, and have a good rest of the week, guys.
Thanks a lot, Knut.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks.
Yep,
Knut.
thanks, Knut.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.